Captain Marcus Chen stood at attention in the sterile briefing room of Harmony Point Station, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. The artificial gravity felt lighter than Earth standard, making him feel like he might float away at any moment. Through the massive viewport, he could see ships from dozens of different species docked at the station's arms, their alien designs both beautiful and intimidating. General Morrison's voice crackled through the holographic display. "Chen, I know. This isn't what you signed up for when you joined the Terran Defense Corps." Marcus kept his expression neutral. He had fought in the border wars, survived 3 different planetary sieges, and earned more combat decorations than he cared to count. Now they wanted him to babysit an alien princess during some fancy diplomatic party. "The Ethereal Dominion specifically requested human protection for Princess Zarakai during the Peace Summit," the general continued. "Apparently, they want to show good faith toward our recent Federation membership. That was politicians speak for, they think we're too primitive to be a real threat." Marcus had heard it all before. Ever since humanity joined the Galactic Federation 6 months ago, most alien species treated them like dangerous children who needed constant supervision. "The princess will arrive in 2 hours," Morrison said. "Your job is simple. Keep her alive and try not to start any wars." The hologram flickered off, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. He adjusted his dress uniform and checked his sidearm. The energy weapon felt foreign in his hands compared to the projectile weapons he preferred, but Federation regulations were clear about approved technology. When the ethereal transport ship docked, Marcus was waiting in the reception bay. The airlock hissed open and 6 tall figures emerged. The ethereals moved with an otherworldly grace, their translucent skin catching the station's lights like living crystal. They wore flowing robes that seemed to shift color as they walked. Princess Zarakai was unmistakable among them. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, her crystalline features sharp and perfect. Her hair fell in waves of silver that seemed to move on their own. When she looked at Marcus, her eyes flashed with an inner light that made him feel like she was reading his soul. "You must be the human," she said, her voice carrying a musical quality that made the translator's mechanical tone sound harsh. "How disappointing." Marcus kept his face blank. "Captain Marcus Chen, Your Highness. I'll be responsible for your security during the summit." Zarakai's guards exchanged glances. One of them, a male with intricate markings on his forehead, stepped forward. "Princess, surely there has been some mistake. A human cannot possibly provide adequate protection." "I specifically requested anyone but a human," Zarakai said, her tone cold. "Yet here we are." Marcus felt his jaw tighten but maintained his professional composure. "I understand your concerns, Your Highness. However, I've been assigned to this duty, and I intend to carry it out to the best of my ability." The princess laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. "Your ability? Human, your species only discovered faster than light travel 50 years ago. We have been protecting ourselves for millennia. Then you should have nothing to worry about," Marcus replied evenly. Zarakai's eyes narrowed. Something flickered across her face too quickly for Marcus to identify. "Indeed. Come then, primitive guardian. Try to keep up." The royal quarters were lavishly appointed with furniture that seemed to grow from the walls rather than being placed there. Marcus conducted a thorough security sweep while the princess settled in. Her guards watched him with barely concealed amusement as he checked air vents and tested emergency protocols. "Such crude methods," one guard whispered to another. "Does he expect assassins to crawl through the ventilation?" Marcus ignored them and continued his work. In his experience, assassins used whatever method worked. Fancy technology meant nothing if someone put a knife in your back while you were admiring it. "Your inspection is complete?" Zarakai asked from her seat on what Marcus assumed was a chair, though it looked more like a sculpture. "Yes, Your Highness. I've identified 3 potential security vulnerabilities and recommended countermeasures to station security." "How thorough of you." Her tone suggested she found thoroughness tedious. "I suppose you'll be lurking in corners for the next 3 days?" "I'll be wherever I need to be to ensure your safety." Zarakai stood and moved to the viewport. Her reflection, in the transparent aluminum looked like a ghost made of starlight. "Tell me, Captain Chen, what do you know about ethereal culture?" "I've read the briefing materials. Your people value art, philosophy, and mental discipline. You've been spacefaring for over 2,000 years and consider yourselves the most advanced civilization in this sector." A textbook answer. She turned to face him. "And what do the textbooks say about humans?" Marcus met her gaze steadily. "That we're a young species with violent tendencies and limited telepathic abilities. Most galactic citizens consider us barely civilized. Yet here you are, trusted with protecting a member of the ethereal royal family." "Yes, ma'am." Zara Kai studied him for a long moment. Her guards had withdrawn to give them privacy, but Marcus could feel their watchful presence. "Do you know why I requested anyone but a human for this assignment? I assumed it was because you consider us inferior. Assumptions can be dangerous, Captain." Her voice carried a warning that made Marcus's combat instincts prickle. "In 3 days, this summit will determine the fate of dozens of worlds. The decisions made here will echo across the galaxy for generations. I understand the stakes, Your Highness. Do you?" Zara Kai moved closer and Marcus caught a scent like ozone and flowers. "Your species fascinates the other delegates. They see humans as unpredictable, brutal, and surprisingly effective. Some find that threatening." Before Marcus could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the room in red, and the station's AI announced a security breach in the diplomatic sector. Marcus's training kicked in instantly. "Your Highness, please move away from the viewport and stay behind me." But Zara Kai was already moving, her guards' training evident in how quickly she took cover. Her own guards rushed into the room, energy weapons drawn. "What is the nature of the threat?" the lead guard demanded. Marcus was already on his communicator. "Security, this is Captain Chen. I need a full tactical assessment of threats to the ethereal delegation." "Unknown hostiles in Section C7, came the reply. "Possible assassination attempt. All delegates are advised to shelter in place." Marcus turned to Zara Kai. "Your Highness, we need to move you to a more secure location." "The royal quarters are perfectly safe," the lead guard insisted. "Our shields and sensors are far superior to anything these attackers might possess." An explosion echoed through the station, close enough to rattle the furniture. Marcus saw something in Zara Kai's eyes that hadn't been there before. Fear. Real, genuine fear that her royal training couldn't quite hide. "Captain Chen," she said, quietly, "I believe it would be wise to listen to your recommendations." The guard captain looked shocked. "Princess, surely you don't trust this human over your own people?" Zara Kai looked at Marcus again, and he saw something else in her crystalline features. Something that looked almost like hope. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "it's time to try a different approach." Outside, another explosion shook the station, and Marcus realized that whatever game was being played here, the rules were about to change completely. Marcus moved through the station corridors with practiced efficiency, his eyes scanning every shadow and doorway. Princess Zara Kai followed close behind him, her usual graceful movements now tense with alertness. Her guards flanked them, their energy weapons humming with power. "The emergency bunker is 2 levels down," the lead guard, Commander Veltar, said through their communication link. "Once we reach it, the princess will be completely safe." Marcus didn't like it. The route Veltar wanted to take went through 3 choke points where attackers could easily trap them. "There's another way," he said. "Through the maintenance sections." "Absolutely not," Veltar replied firmly. "Those areas are beneath the dignity of the royal family." "Dead royalty doesn't have much dignity either," Marcus muttered. Zara Kai's voice cut through their argument. "We will follow Captain Chen's route." Veltar looked stunned. "Princess, those passages are used by station workers and repair crews. They're dirty and crude." "They're also unexpected," Marcus said, already leading them toward a service hatch. "If someone planned this attack, they'll be watching the main routes." The maintenance corridors were exactly as cramped and industrial as Veltar had warned. The ethereals had to duck to avoid the low-hanging pipes, and their flowing robes kept catching on protruding machinery. Marcus felt more comfortable here than he had since arriving at the station. This was terrain he understood, They had made it halfway to the bunker when Marcus's instinct screamed danger. He held up a hand, stopping the group, and listened carefully. The station's normal background hum was wrong. Someone had tampered with the environmental systems. "Gas attack," he said, pulling out his emergency respirator. "Everyone put on breathing gear now." "Impossible," Veltar said. "Our sensors would have detected any toxins." A sweet floral scent began filling the corridor. The ethereal guards immediately began to sway on their feet, their natural telepathic abilities making them more vulnerable to neural toxins. Veltar collapsed first, followed by the other guards. Marcus grabbed Zarakai's arm as she started to fall. "Hold your breath and follow me." The princess nodded, her crystalline skin already taking on a sickly pallor. Marcus half carried her through the corridor, searching for an emergency air supply. The attackers had done their homework. They knew ethereal physiology better than anyone expected. Marcus found a maintenance airlock and dragged Zarakai inside. The clean air made her gasp and cough, but her color began returning to normal. "My guards," she said weakly. "They'll be fine once the gas clears. Unconscious, but alive." Marcus checked his weapon and peered through the airlock's small window. This wasn't random. Someone knew exactly what toxin would affect your people. Zarakai steadied herself against the airlock wall. That should be impossible. Ethereal neural chemistry is classified information. Someone has inside knowledge. Marcus saw movement in the corridor outside. 3 figures in environmental suits were advancing toward their position, carrying weapons he didn't recognize. And they're coming to finish the job. The attackers reached the airlock door and began working on the lock mechanism. Marcus realized they had maybe 30 seconds before the door opened. "Your Highness, I need you to do exactly what I say." Zarakai nodded, her usual arrogance replaced by trust born of desperation. "When I open this door, you're going to run toward that junction we passed about 20 meters back. Don't look back, don't stop, just run." "What about you?" Marcus smiled grimly. "I'm going to show these professionals what amateur hour looks like." The door hissed open, and Marcus exploded outward in a move that caught the attackers completely off guard. Instead of using cover or trying to outshoot them, he tackled the nearest one, using the close quarters to his advantage. His knife found the gap in the attacker's armor before the alien could bring his weapon to bear. The second attacker fired, but Marcus was already moving, using his first victim as a shield. Ethereal combat doctrine emphasized elegant dueling and precise weapon work. Human combat doctrine emphasized winning by any means necessary. Marcus rolled under the third attacker's line of fire and came up with a chunk of metal piping. The improvised weapon crushed the alien's weapon before he could fire again. A quick strike to what Marcus hoped was a vulnerable joint sent the attacker crashing into the wall. The second attacker was trying to get a clear shot when Zarakai appeared behind him. The princess had found a heavy maintenance tool and brought it down on the attacker's head with surprising force. "I thought I told you to run," Marcus said, checking to make sure the corridor was clear. "I don't follow orders well," Zarakai replied, breathing heavily. "It's a character flaw." Marcus searched the attackers and found identification that made his blood run cold. These aren't random terrorists. They're hegemony operatives. The Hegemony Coalition was the most aggressive military alliance in the galaxy. If they were targeting ethereal royalty during a peace summit, it meant the situation was far more serious than anyone had let on. "We need to get to the bunker," Marcus said. "No." Zarakai's voice was firm. "We need to go to my quarters. That's the first place they'll look for you. There's something I need to retrieve. Something important enough to risk my life for." Marcus studied her face. The fear was still there, but underneath it was a determination that reminded him of soldiers he'd served with. People who had made hard choices and were prepared to live with the consequences. "What aren't you telling me?" he asked. Zarakai looked at the unconscious attackers, then back at Marcus. "Hey, Captain Chen, what do you know about human combat techniques?" The question caught him off guard. "I know what I was trained to do. Why?" "Your people fight differently than anyone else in the galaxy. You use improvised weapons, unconventional tactics, things that other species would consider dishonorable. We use what works." "Yes?" She stepped closer to him, and he saw something new in her crystalline eyes. "Captain, I need to ask you something, and I need you to understand that everything depends on your answer." "Go ahead." Zarakai took a deep breath. "Would you be willing to teach me how to fight like a human?" Marcus stared at her. An ethereal princess wanting to learn crude human combat techniques was like a master artist asking to learn finger painting. Your Highness, I'm not sure I understand. My people are dying, Captain. Not just here, but across the galaxy. Our elegant combat forms and refined weapons are beautiful, but they're not practical against enemies who don't follow the same rules. She gestured at the unconscious attackers. These hegemony operatives just proved that sophisticated defenses are useless against simple brutality. Marcus felt the pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. You knew this attack was coming. I suspected it might happen. That's why I specifically requested anyone but a human for protection. You wanted them to underestimate your security. Zarakai smiled, and for the first time, it looked genuine rather than polite. You're quicker than most people give humans credit for. So why do you want to learn human combat techniques? The princess's expression grew serious. Because I'm tired of being helpless. Captain Chen. I'm tired of depending on others to keep me alive while my people are slaughtered by enemies who don't care about honor or tradition. Marcus looked at the destruction around them, then back at the alien princess who had just asked him to teach her the dirty, brutal art of human warfare. When do we start? He asked. Zarakai's smile could have lit up the entire station. Right now. But first we need to get to my quarters. I have something to show you that will explain why this attack was just the beginning. Marcus watched as Princess Zarakai moved through the practice sequence he had taught her. Her natural ethereal grace was slowly giving way to something more practical, more dangerous. Instead of the flowing movements of traditional ethereal combat, she was learning to strike hard and fast, to use whatever was available as a weapon. Better, Marcus said as she completed a disarming technique. But you're still thinking too much about looking elegant. In a real fight, ugly and alive beats beautiful and dead. They were in a cargo bay that Zarakai had somehow arranged to have cleared for their private training sessions. For the past 2 days, she had been learning everything Marcus could teach her about human combat philosophy. The princess was a surprisingly quick student, adapting techniques to work with her longer reach and natural telepathic abilities. Try it again, Marcus said. But this time, imagine your opponent is twice your size and doesn't care about fighting fair. Zarakai nodded and reset her stance. This time when she moved, there was something different in her attack. Something ruthless that hadn't been there before. Her strike would have disabled a human opponent permanently. Much better. You're starting to think like a survivor instead of a duelist. The princess sat down on a cargo container, breathing heavily. Is this really how humans approach combat? With such directness? When our lives depend on it, yes. We don't have natural telepathy or energy manipulation abilities like other species. We have to rely on being tougher, more adaptable, and more willing to do whatever it takes to win. Zarakai was quiet for a moment, studying her hands. Captain, what do you know about the current state of galactic politics? The question seemed to come from nowhere, only what's in the standard briefings. The hegemony coalition is expanding aggressively, but the Federation is working on peaceful solutions. The Federation is failing, Zarakai said bluntly. 3 member worlds have been conquered in the past year. 2 more are under siege. The hegemony grows stronger while we debate and negotiate. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cargo bay's temperature. Why are you telling me this? Zarakai stood and walked to a control panel on the wall. She pressed her palm against it, and Marcus heard several locking mechanisms engage. Whatever she was about to show him, she wanted to make sure they wouldn't be interrupted. Because you need to understand what's really happening at this summit. She activated a holographic display that filled the center of the room with star charts and tactical information. This is what my father plans to sign tomorrow. Marcus studied the data, his military training helping him interpret the strategic implications. What he saw made his stomach turn. This isn't a peace treaty. It's a surrender. Worse than that, it's a betrayal. Zarakai manipulated the display, highlighting specific sectors. The hegemony demanded tribute worlds in exchange for not attacking Federation core systems. My father agreed to sacrifice the outer colonies. Marcus saw familiar names on the list of worlds to be abandoned, human colonies, along with several other younger species that had recently joined the Federation. He's throwing the new members to the wolves. The logic is simple, Zarakai said bitterly. Better to lose the primitive worlds than risk the advanced civilizations. My father believes the hegemony will be satisfied with controlling the frontier and leave the established powers alone. That's not how aggressive empires work. Give them the frontier and they'll just use it as a base to attack the core worlds. I know that. You know that. But the other delegation leaders are too afraid to see the truth. Zarakai closed the display and turned to face him. That's why I asked you to train me, Captain. I've been gathering evidence of my father's plans, but I need someone the conspirators would never suspect to help me expose them. Marcus felt the pieces falling into place. That's why you specifically requested anyone but a human. You knew they'd assign one anyway, and you counted on everyone underestimating us. Your species has a reputation for being unpredictable and resourceful. I was hoping those traits would be useful. What kind of evidence are we talking about? Zarakai activated another display. This one showing recorded conversations and encrypted data files. Communications between my father and hegemony commanders. Resource assessments of the worlds they plan to abandon. Military intelligence about Federation defenses. Marcus watched the data scroll past and realized the scope of what she was showing him. This is treason on a galactic scale. Yes. And if this treaty is signed, billions of people will die or be enslaved. She looked directly at him, including everyone on the human colonies. Why come to me? Why not contact Federation intelligence directly? Because my father's allies have people throughout the Federation government. I don't know who to trust. Zarakai's crystalline features hardened with determination. But I know that humans have nothing to gain from this betrayal and everything to lose. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. The assassination attempts. They weren't random. My father's allies know I've been gathering intelligence. They want me dead before I can reveal what I've learned. She smiled grimly. They underestimated both of us. They expected my guards to protect me using traditional methods, and they expected you to be a crude human who couldn't adapt to sophisticated threats. But your own guards don't know about this? I couldn't risk it. Some of them have served my father for decades. Their loyalty is to the throne, not to me personally. Marcus understood the lonely position she was in. A princess surrounded by people she couldn't trust, fighting against her own father to save people who didn't even know they were in danger. What do you need me to do? Help me get this information to the right people and... She hesitated. Keep teaching me to fight like a human. If we're discovered before we can expose the conspiracy, I want to be able to defend myself. Zarakai, Marcus said, using her name without her title for the first time. This is dangerous beyond anything you've faced before. If your father discovers what you're doing, then I'll die fighting for something that matters instead of living as a pampered princess while billions suffer. Her voice carried absolute conviction. Captain, will you help me? Marcus thought about the human colonies on the abandonment list. Families who had risked everything to build new lives on distant worlds, now marked for sacrifice by politicians who considered them expendable. He thought about the other young species who would be thrown away to buy a temporary peace. Yes, he said, but we do this my way. Human way. No honor, no tradition, just whatever it takes to win. Zarakai's smile was fierce with anticipation. Teach me. Over the next hour, Marcus showed her more than just combat techniques. He taught her about human concepts of warfare, deception, misdirection, using an enemy's expectations against them. She absorbed it all with the intensity of someone whose life depended on understanding. Your people are remarkable, she said during a break. You take concepts that other species consider dishonorable and turn them into advantages. We adapt, Marcus said simply. It's what we do. Then teach me to adapt. Zarakai stood up, ready to continue training. Because tomorrow, we're going to change everything. Marcus looked at the alien princess who had chosen to fight beside him against impossible odds and realized that she was right. Tomorrow, one way or another, everything would change. He just hoped they would both survive to see what came next. The emergency sirens that woke Marcus from his light sleep were different from the ones they had heard during the first attack. These were deeper, more urgent, the kind that meant the station itself was under assault. He rolled out of his makeshift bed in the cargo bay and immediately checked his weapons. Zarakai, he called to the princess, who was already moving toward the equipment lockers they had prepared. I know, she said, her voice tight with tension. My father discovered what we've been doing. Through the cargo bay's small viewport, Marcus could see explosions lighting up the station's outer hull. Ships were docked at multiple airlocks, disgorging armed troops that moved with military precision. This wasn't another assassination attempt. This was a full-scale invasion, How many people are coming for us? Marcus asked as he checked his ammunition. Zarakai closed her eyes and extended her telepathic senses. The ability that had once seemed like cheating to Marcus now felt like their only advantage. Too many. Hegemony troops, my father's personal guards, and... She paused, her crystalline features going pale. Something else. Something that blocks my telepathy. Marcus felt ice in his veins. If the enemy had anti-telepathic capabilities, they had planned for everything. We need to reach the communication center and transmit your evidence before they can stop us. The main routes will be watched. Then we use the routes they won't expect. Marcus activated the cargo bay's emergency override and opened a maintenance hatch. Time to see if you learned anything useful. They moved through the station's service corridors like ghosts, using every technique Marcus had taught Zarakai about moving unseen. The princess had adapted his lessons well, combining human stealth methods with her natural ethereal grace to become nearly invisible in the shadowy passages. Behind them, they could hear the sounds of systematic searching. Their enemies were checking every room, every corridor, closing in with methodical efficiency. There, Zarakai whispered, pointing to an access panel. The communication center is directly above us. Marcus examined the panel and frowned. It's locked down. Someone's already taken control of the station's communication systems. Can you bypass it? Maybe, but it'll take time we don't have. Marcus listened to the approaching footsteps. They're getting closer. Zarakai placed her hand on the panel and closed her eyes. Let me try something. Energy flowed from her fingertips into the station's systems. It was a technique no ethereal would normally use, far too crude and direct for their refined sensibilities. But combined with human pragmatism, it worked. The panel sparked and opened. Nicely done, Marcus said, impressed by how she had adapted her natural abilities. They climbed through the access shaft and emerged in the communication center. The room was dark except for the glow of monitoring screens. But Marcus's enhanced vision immediately spotted the problem. Bodies on the floor. Station personnel who had been killed defending their posts. Professional work, he muttered, checking the wounds. Quick and efficient. Zarakai was already at the main console, her fingers flying over the controls. The transmission array is still functional, but they've installed some kind of jamming device. Marcus found the jamming unit attached to the primary communications relay. It was hegemony technology, designed to block all outgoing signals. But like most sophisticated equipment, it had a weakness that crude human methods could exploit. Stand back, he warned, then used his combat knife to short-circuit the device's power supply. Sparks flew, alarms blared, and the jamming field collapsed. Zarakai immediately began uploading her evidence files to the Galactic communication network. Upload at 60%, she reported. That's when the first energy blast took out the console next to her. Marcus spun around to see armed figures pouring through the communication center's main entrance. Hegemony soldiers in powered armor, moving with the coordination of an elite unit. Keep working, Marcus shouted, drawing his weapon and taking cover behind a server bank. I'll hold them off. The firefight that followed was unlike anything in Marcus's experience. The hegemony soldiers had superior weapons and armor, but they fought like they expected their enemies to follow conventional tactics. Marcus gave them something else entirely. He used the communication center's equipment as improvised weapons, hurling components at his attackers and using the room's layout to force them into killing zones. When his energy weapon overheated, he switched to a projectile backup that punched through their energy shields. 70%, Zarakai called out, still working at the damaged console despite energy blasts passing inches from her head. More soldiers poured into the room. Marcus realized they were being overwhelmed when he felt something change in the air around him. Zarakai had extended her telepathic abilities to include him in a combat link. Suddenly, he could sense the enemy's positions and intentions as clearly as if he could see through walls. His movements became perfectly coordinated with Zarakai's tactical awareness, creating a fighting partnership that was more than the sum of its parts. Together, they carved through the hegemony forces with devastating efficiency. Zarakai used her telepathy to predict enemy movements while Marcus provided the brutal physical response that their sophisticated tactics couldn't counter and non-endear. Percent, she reported. A new figure entered the room, and Marcus felt Zarakai's shock through their mental link. The newcomer was tall and imposing, wearing the ceremonial armor of an ethereal royal guard. Commander Veltar, Zarakai said, her voice filled with betrayal. You were working with them all along. The guard captain's expression was cold and unforgiving. Your father gave you every chance to accept your role, Princess. You chose treason instead. Veltar raised a weapon Marcus had never seen before, something that hummed with deadly energy. The shot took Marcus in the chest, burning through his armor and dropping him to his knees. Through the pain, he saw Zarakai's face transform with rage. She abandoned the console and launched herself at Veltar with moves that combined ethereal grace with human brutality. The guard captain was skilled, but he had never faced an opponent who fought like she did. Upload complete, the console announced as Zarakai and Veltar fought. Marcus tried to stand, but his vision was going dark. The wound in his chest was fatal. He could feel his life draining away, but the evidence was transmitted. The conspiracy was exposed. Zarakai defeated Veltar and rushed to Marcus's side. Stay with me, she said, her hands glowing with healing energy. Did we get it out? Marcus asked weakly. Yes, the entire galaxy knows the truth now. Marcus smiled. Good, that's what matters. Zarakai's healing energy poured into him, but they both knew it wasn't enough. The damage was too severe for normal ethereal healing techniques. There is a way, she said quietly, but it's forbidden. It would permanently bond our minds together. Marcus looked into her crystalline eyes and saw the person she had become through their partnership. No longer a pampered princess, but a warrior who understood what it meant to fight for something bigger than yourself. Do it, he said. Zarakai placed her hands on his chest and opened her mind completely to his. The pain disappeared as their consciousness merged, their thoughts and emotions becoming shared. Marcus felt her determination, her courage, her absolute refusal to let him die. The healing that flowed between them was unlike anything in ethereal medical knowledge. It was powered not by technique, but by the human concept that some things were worth any sacrifice. When the light faded, Marcus was alive and their minds were permanently linked. Outside, the battle for the station continued, but the real war had already been won. The truth was spreading across the galaxy and there was no way to stop it. What happens now? Marcus asked. Zarakai helped him to his feet, and he could feel her thoughts as clearly as his own. Now we face the consequences of what we've done together. The great assembly hall of the Galactic Federation had never seen anything like it. Representatives from hundreds of worlds sat in stunned silence as the evidence played on massive screens above their heads. Communications between ethereal Emperor Zarthan and hegemony commanders, battle plans for the conquest of frontier worlds, lists of species marked for extinction. Marcus stood beside Princess Zarakai at the center of the hall, still adjusting to the strange sensation of their linked minds. He could feel her nervousness beneath her composed exterior, and she could sense his readiness to fight if their enemies tried anything. The Emperor himself sat in the ethereal delegation section, his crystalline features showing no emotion as his own words condemned him. Around him, other ethereal nobles shifted uncomfortably, some looking shocked, others calculating how this revelation would affect their own positions. The evidence speaks for itself, announced Chancellor Morden, the Federation's chief administrator. Emperor Zarthan, how do you respond to these accusations? The Emperor rose slowly, his ancient dignity intact despite the disaster unfolding around him. The accusations are true, he said simply. I negotiated with the hegemony to preserve what could be preserved. Gasps echoed through the assembly. Even his supporters hadn't expected such a direct admission. You betrayed your allies, shouted Ambassador Krethak of the Centauri Republic. You sold entire worlds to save your own. I made the hard choice that none of you had the courage to make, Zarthan replied coldly. The hegemony cannot be defeated by conventional means. Sacrifice was necessary to prevent total annihilation. Marcus felt Zarakai's anger spike through their mental link. She stepped forward, her voice carrying across the hall without amplification. You chose which species deserved to live and which deserved to die, she said. You decided that humans, Centaurians, and dozens of other young races were expendable because they weren't as advanced as we are. They are young and reckless, Zarthan said, looking directly at Marcus. Like this human who corrupted you with his primitive ideas. This human saved my life, Zarakai replied. He taught me that true strength doesn't come from considering yourself superior to others. It comes from being willing to adapt, to learn, to do whatever it takes to protect those who can't protect themselves. Through their link, Marcus felt her gathering herself for what came next. This was the moment she had been preparing for since they first started training together. Father, as heir to the ethereal throne, I formally challenge your right to rule. The hall erupted in chaos. Ethereal nobles shouted in multiple languages, Federation representatives demanded order, and security forces moved to positions around the chamber. Emperor Zarthan's expression didn't change. You cannot challenge me, daughter. You have bonded with an alien mind. By our laws, you are no longer truly ethereal. By our laws, a ruler who betrays his allies is no longer worthy of the throne, Zarakai shot back. And my bond with Captain Chen hasn't made me less ethereal. It's made me more than I was before. Marcus watched the political maneuvering with the detached interest of a soldier observing a battlefield. Through Zarakai's knowledge, he understood the implications of what was happening. If she could successfully challenge her father's authority, the betrayal treaty would be void. The princess raises a valid point, Chancellor Morden said, consulting his legal advisors. Under ethereal law, a formal challenge must be answered. Very well, Zarthan said. But if you lose, daughter, you will be exiled forever, and your human pet will share your fate. Zarakai's response was calm and determined. I accept those terms. The challenge ritual was ancient, older than ethereal space travel. It required the challenger to demonstrate superior wisdom, courage, and leadership. Under normal circumstances, it would take days of formal debate and testing, but these weren't normal circumstances. I propose a different kind of test, Zarakai announced. Let me prove my worth by leading the defense against the hegemony fleet that's approaching this system. Marcus felt her plan through their mental connection and almost smiled. She was thinking like a human now, turning the enemy's attack into an opportunity. The hegemony has 12 battle cruisers and 40 support ships. Admiral Kextar of the Federation fleet reported, Our combined forces can match them, but casualties will be severe. Not if we fight smart instead of fighting fair, Zarakai said. She activated a holographic display showing the approaching enemy fleet. Captain Chen has taught me that superior numbers mean nothing if you can outthink your opponent. What followed was the most unconventional military briefing in Federation history. Zarakai outlined tactics that no ethereal commander would ever consider. Feints and misdirection, using civilian ships as decoys, targeting support vessels instead of capital ships. This is madness, Admiral Kextar protested. These tactics violate every principle of honorable warfare. The hegemony doesn't care about honor, Marcus said, speaking for the first time since entering the hall. They care about winning. If you want to beat them, you have to be willing to win ugly. Emperor Zarthan watched his daughter's presentation with growing alarm. You would have us fight like barbarians? I would have us fight like survivors, Zarakai replied. Captain Chen's people have something we've forgotten. They adapt. They overcome. They refuse to quit even when the odds are impossible. The debate that followed was intense, with traditional military commanders arguing against the unorthodox tactics. But as reports came in of the hegemony fleet's approach, practical necessity won over military tradition. The battle itself was a masterpiece of unconventional warfare. Federation ships used hit-and-run tactics. Civilian vessels created false sensor readings, and the entire engagement was fought according to human military principles adapted for space combat. Marcus watched from the command center as Zarakai coordinated the defense. Through their mental link, she had access to all his tactical knowledge, while he could feel her natural telepathic abilities enhancing their coordination with allied ships. The hegemony fleet was destroyed with minimal Federation casualties. In the aftermath, Emperor Zarthan's political position became impossible. Faced with his daughter's success and his own exposed betrayal, he abdicated the throne. But Zarakai's final request surprised everyone. I don't want the throne, she announced to the assembled delegates. I want something more important. She turned to Marcus, and through their link he felt what she was about to ask. Captain Chen, I'm requesting that you help me rebuild the ethereal military doctrine. Not just for my people, but for the entire Federation. Teach us to think like humans when we fight. Show us how to adapt and overcome. Marcus looked around the assembly hall at representatives from dozens of species, all watching him with a mixture of curiosity and hope. Your Highness, he said formally, I accept your request. The transformation that followed changed the balance of galactic civilization. Human tactical thinking spread throughout the Federation military, not replacing traditional methods but enhancing them. The rigid hierarchies that had made the Federation vulnerable to hegemony expansion gave way to more flexible, adaptive strategies. Marcus became the first human inducted into the ethereal Royal Guard, but more importantly, he became a symbol of what cooperation between species could achieve. The mental bond he shared with Zarakai proved that the barriers between different forms of consciousness could be overcome. Years later, when historians tried to identify the turning point in the war against the hegemony, they would point to the moment when a human marine agreed to teach an alien princess how to fight. But Marcus knew the real turning point had come much earlier, in a cargo bay where a princess had made a simple request that changed everything. Teach me to fight like a human. That request had started as a desperate plea for survival. It became the foundation for a new kind of civilization, one where strength came not from superiority but from the willingness to learn from others, to adapt and to never give up. Standing beside Zarakai in the rebuilt Federation capital, watching human and alien soldiers train together using tactics that combined the best of all species, Marcus reflected on how far they had come. The princess who had once dismissed him as primitive now shared his thoughts and dreams. The human who had been assigned to protect her had become her partner in reshaping the galaxy, and it had all started with a request that neither of them could have imagined would change the fate of billions of lives. The war with the hegemony still raged in distant sectors, but now the Federation fought with the adaptability and determination that humans had brought to the galaxy. They fought with the understanding that true strength came from diversity, from the willingness to learn and grow. They fought to win,